Hello. Welcome to Seeking Heaven, the Near-Death Experience and Other Phenomena. I'm your host, Tamara Calder Richardson, and I'm a six-time near-death experiencer as well as evidential medium and Christ channeler. And welcome to my channel. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. Share with your friends, especially if you have a particular favorite episode. Like, make comments, and also consider being a member. Every bit of financial support is really appreciated. And also, I have amazing perks, so do check that out. So let me tell you about today's guest. We have a guest all the way from England let me tell you a little bit about him. He is a near-death experience researcher, and his passion led him into this area about the afterlife and looking into that whole area of consciousness and any type of unexplained experience that someone might have. And I'm going to have him come on and explain his path, his journey, and how this has progressed. And we have Darren McKenney. So welcome, Darren.
Hi, Tamara. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Did I say your name right?
Almost. Very close. It's Darren McKenney. No, don't worry. No one ever gets it. It's an Irish name, and it's as it sounds, but it is very confusing for most people.
Okay, so say it one more time. McKenney?
McKenney. Or some people say McEnany, but for me there's no A in it, so I just say McKenney.
McKenney. Okay, McKenney. I got it. That's good. Okay, I have Irish in my family, so. Well, look, welcome to the show. I've been following your channel, which is Seeking I, and you have quality guests. And wow, you have so many different things going on, which will tell people at the end ways to get in touch with you and all the things that you have going on, including writing a book. But I wanted to find out, I'm very curious about how you got involved with this whole afterlife research, because I'm sure that you've learned a lot along the way, as well as things that people don't tell you. I know I've learned a lot just having other people that are unlike me. So how did this all perk your interest? At what point did this take off as a passion?
When I was 12 years old, I had a traumatic experience. Something that most people wouldn't consider traumatic, which is I passed out or I fainted in a science lesson. But for me, the reason that was traumatic is because it developed into a anxiety disorder, a severe generalized anxiety disorder, which eventually evolved into severe depression as well. And before that, I still am very scientifically minded, but I was on the kind of the material side of science, in the sense that the brain creates consciousness and that's it. Once you die, you die. I didn't like it, but that's what it was. And that did frighten me, that concept of never existing again. But I never really thought much of it until that experience, when the anxiety began to develop. And it's focused around health. The majority of it was health anxiety, and it still is to this day. Which of course led me to think more deeply about the concept of death, and worrying that every little thing that I felt would lead to death. And if anybody's ever had kind of a health anxiety disorder, a stomachache will become, a stomach tumor in your mind, and it's going to be 2 months left to live, and things like that. Everything is greatly exaggerated. So everything that I felt, I was expecting to die, and it wasn't a nice way to live, and that's why I ended up suicidal at 16.
Oh, wow. And so many people this can benefit by hearing this. So is it okay if I ask you what was the health threat, or was it just a kind of like just a phobia of health concerns in general?
Well, ultimately, there was nothing physically wrong with me. It was all it was mostly psychosomatic. As I say, every little symptom in my mind was a death sentence. And I was in and out of the doctors, not drastically often, but often enough where they were able to diagnose me with anxiety, a severe anxiety disorder. It did lead to various issues like and going slightly back a bit, the reason this all started I believe is because I was bullied when I was in primary school, or you'd call elementary school. I can't say that is what started it, but I believe that's what started it. And
you were a bullier? Is that it? You bled easily? Is that what you said?
No, I was bullied. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I had someone who was bullying me a lot at school, and yeah, and the stress from it. Sorry, I know it's my accent. It's pretty pretty weird, but the stress from that led to me developing shingles, because it effectively wiped my immune system out. and I was always very shy, and I think that's what led to the anxiety. But apart from that, it never really caused me any other physical issues. It was all mental issues, to the extent where, every day I was feeling like I was physically dying. And people, when they think of anxiety, they think it means worry and just worrying, but it has a huge physical impact on your well-being as well. You feel like you're dying, physically like you're dying. You've got no energy, you can't move, you feel sick all the time, you feel dizzy all the time, and I mean 24 hours a day. And when I was at 16, I just thought, I don't want to be here anymore living like this. It's not worth it. Luckily, the fear of death saved me there, ironically, because I didn't want to experience that. I thought, now that I'm at the bottom and the only other choice is annihilation, I might as well just hang on and hope that it resolves itself, because otherwise the alternative isn't any better.
Wow. Who did you have to talk to during this time?
My mum mainly. My dad was there. He wasn't as kind of knowledgeable, I suppose, about anxiety, because he comes from a family where it's kind of get up and get on with it. It's no fault of it. I don't blame him at all for it, because that's just the way he is. But he did help along a lot as well, because he instilled in me that, don't give up and just keep going and get yourself over it kind of attitude. But mum was the emotional support there. I had the GP, my general practitioner doctor, who first diagnosed me and sent me on to counselling. Counsellors did very little to help me. What they were telling me was out of textbooks, very young, no experience, directly out of textbooks, which I didn't find helpful at all. The only benefit was that they put me on the antidepressants, which, although, ideally you want to be able to deal with this stuff naturally, there's no denying that antidepressants does certainly numb it to the level where you can begin to work on yourself. So apart from that, I'd say the therapy did not much for me at all. And it was effectively just a case of forcing myself through each day and learning how my own mind worked, how my own body worked, learning what meant what and how to deal with it. And that took, as I say, since I was 12, and I'm stable at the moment, although it's still there. So it's taken that long for me to really learn enough about myself to keep myself stable.
And all this, I mean, you were a relatively young. How old were you at this point when all this happened? I'm just kind of...
It began at 12. And it went through until I was 16, when I had the emotional breakdown, which led to me being suicidal. They pulled me out of school for the last year of the GCSEs, which are the exam years. During the time, they put me in the learning support area of the school, which was mainly at that time suited for those who had severe learning disabilities. So my grades went from A pluses and A's down to D's and E's. And I came out with not particularly good GCSEs, but during that time, I was out of the school system, which would make sense. I forced myself back in eventually to school for the A levels, and I came out with A pluses all round. So I was thankful for that. But yeah, I mean, that lasted all through my teenage years, from 12 to 18 onwards, and it's still, I mean, it's still going on. I still get stages of suicidal tendencies. I still get severe anxiety. I'm living a lot with an irritable bowel at the moment, which is awful. That's anxiety related, so it never goes away.
Right, I hear you. Yeah, I used to have that as a kid, and then I did some past life stuff, and it went away. I mean, literally, it was bad as a kid on till like early 30s, and I got some past life stuff, and I was shocked. It literally just like it disappeared. So we wonder. So much of this is, carried with us on a soul level, but finding it's a whole nother thing. Being able to find that, because we're, pretty big, but it sounds like you were an intense little kid.
It wasn't fun. My childhood, certainly my school life, wasn't fun at all, and I wouldn't go back. But I wouldn't have it any differently, because it's made me the way I am now, and I'd be a totally different person if it wasn't for that. I'd be nowhere near as strong and as as knowledgeable, I suppose, as I am now, to make myself sound a little bit big-headed.
No, and also I don't think so, because I think that we talked about this pre-show a little bit, but you were saying about how you love helping people, especially in this area. So you wouldn't be able to understand to help people if you didn't have it yourself. My aspiration, I suppose, is to start a private practice in cognitive behavioural therapy. I originally wanted to do teaching,
When I was very young, I wanted to be an ice cream man. But yeah, well, I just liked ice cream. But anyway, nowadays, I plan on doing a cognitive behavioural therapy practice, which I'm doing a bachelor's degree in at the moment. And the reason for that is because, as I say, when I went to counselling, it did very little for me, because the majority of those counsellors were 24, 22, just out of university, what they learned through textbooks. And there was limited amount of empathy. And I think anything related to psychology and emotional well-being, you need that level of empathy, of experience, personal experience, to really understand what's going on and to really get an understanding of how to help those who are in the position. Because if you haven't learned how to help yourself in the issues that you're trying to solve for people, there's no way you can try and help others without understanding yourself first, if that makes sense.
It absolutely makes sense. I mean, absolutely. I mean, think about it. If someone is helping someone that's a drug addict, well, how are they going to know about what they're going through unless they've been one too? I mean, so we can complain about certain things that we've had in life. Mine was childhood abuse, physical and mental, and I wasn't beat. It was sexual abuse. But the thing is, it's like, but now I can see it in others. They don't even have to tell me. I know. And I have compassion.
Yeah. And there's so many nuances involved in any form of experience that you can learn from university, you can learn from school the outline of disorders, how they manifest, how they manipulate our minds, etc., etc. But there are so many nuances, and everybody experiences it in a different way, that you can only look so far for signs and diagnoses and levels of help. But what I find is there's only one way of supporting anxiety and other mental illnesses, and that is to teach the person not how to fix it, but how to understand themselves and how to understand the way these disorders manifest in their own lives, and to observe their own mind, observe their own behaviours, and learn how they work, because nobody else will be reacting in the same way. And there's no one cure for every person.
Absolutely. So do you have any idea what that trigger was early on, or no?
I think it began with the bullying. I don't know, but I believe it did. And then I was always very shy, very withdrawn as a child. Had a very, very overly strong attachment to my mum. Still do, but I was very much with her all through my time. Very sensitive. So I think that was just effectively part of my nature. Whether that was from a past life or whether it was just genetics, I don't know. I know my father's side had a lot of this, so it's probably genetic to some degree. But then the fainting was the trigger, because that was just the sensation of it was horrendous, and it I don't know why, but that triggered off the disorder big time.
Well, it's that losing control when you faint and you feel really nauseous. It's a loss of control. I've fainted a couple times, and it's horrible because it's a horrible nausea, but you have this sense of no control, and it can be scary. Someone was taking blood too fast up from my veins to check it, and they missed the vein, and I went and I passed out.
Yeah,
and
Every time now I go to have blood drawn, or I see someone having blood drawn, I've had blood drawn maybe 3 times in my life. It always results in a vasovagal response, or a fainting response. And now this is a thing because I like to understand everything. I go right into the science of it. So I don't mean to call it a vasovagal response. It's fainting basically, but I go into the information of everything really much in depth when it happens to me, just because I like to understand things.
Yeah, well, I think it's that loss of control. It's funny. My husband did he's tall, and they took blood too fast. When we were getting married, you have to get blood. And they had to give him orange juice only because he was embarrassed. I'm like, don't worry about it, but yeah, it is, and so I understand that feeling, and it is similar in terms of, it's not the same thing as dying, but it is a similar in terms of you can't control it. And sometimes I think that's I could totally understand how that could be a trigger. I do. And it could be shocking. So And this world, we're not guaranteed there's not going to be pain in this world, emotional, spiritual, or physical.
I'd say you almost are guaranteed to experience at least some of that in life.
I mean, if you're on the journey and you live long enough, it's going to happen. I met this doctor once. I had to have bone surgery because I broke it with martial arts. And I said, what's going on? He goes, well, arthritis could be sitting. I said, arthritis. He goes, oh, that could happen at any age. He said, look, if you live long enough, everybody gets that. I said, they do? He goes, yeah, it's just part of what happens as you get older. I went, oh, man. So yeah, this part of being on the journey that we have to experience this, but it also strangely connects us to other humans, and it makes us, I don't
it
like
very much
humbles those of us who have a very strong ego and believe that we are better than everyone else, because ultimately you're not. And suffering is one of those things that really wakes you up to realize that we are all effectively the same, and that's not just between humans, but between humans and animals as well, who are all ultimately the same.
Yeah. So before we really dive deep into this, I've got to tell you, your dog is so freaking cute. I'm a big dog person. Oh my God, he's so cute. I'm a dog mom. I've always been a dog mom, and all mine look like teddy bears. They're like Shih Tzus. They look like little teddy bears. And so cute. Yeah, I have a real connection with my animals.
I've always had a much stronger connection with animals than I have with any person. I mean, I've lost grandparents. I've lost cousins at 12 years old who was, they were severely disabled, but I lost a cousin who was 21 from suicide. But losing my two schnauzers, Ty and Omi, last year was the worst grief, and the only grief really I've ever felt in my life. And I've had people telling me, well, fair enough, you're sad, but it's not like you lost a child. I'm saying, yes, it is. There's no difference. Love is love,
Love is love. And, this sounds really horrible. I won't say who it was, but there was a family member that was really close to me. I've had a couple. And I don't know why I'm not a crier. I didn't cry, or I might have for a couple seconds, I might have been sad. But when my animals die, I am literally tortured in my heart. I am tortured. I feel lost. I feel like I don't know if I can go on tomorrow. I mean, this is in my mind, they are my children, in my mind. And I what do you call it? We connect. I don't know if you want to call it telepathy, but we connect. We're like buds. And so to me, it is like a child. I know people wouldn't understand that, but that is my child. I never had children. They are my children. So
it makes very little difference if a being comes from you in the sense of a child, or if a being comes from elsewhere, but you develop the same amount of love. It makes very little difference. Like you could lose a family member and feel somewhat grieved, but you could lose a best friend who's been in your life a lot longer and has done a lot more for you and feel a lot worse at their loss. It doesn't matter, whose blood you have. It's the connections you make with people.
Exactly. And it is the relationships you have with people. And I've met people doing this as you have, online globally, like you, I'm in the USA, you're in England. I've met people that I instantly connect with and have tremendous love for and trust them more than people that live around the corner. not to be disrespectful or ugly, but I do. So
it's the way we are.
I can't help it. Your heart knows the difference with people, and they know people's intentions, and if they're pure or not. And I think that's one thing I love about the connection with animals, and that love is that it's I know that I'll see them again, but it's something deeper within me, and it's something that I have had after death and death experiences with dogs. I mean, I've had them telepathically say things. I've heard them when they've come back. I think it's awesome. I can tell you this, Darren, and we'll jump into the core of some of the things I want to ask you. But I've had in readings that people come through and they're like, and their animal comes through and people lose it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it
Yeah,
could be simple,
yeah.
like a red ball, and the guy was like a blubbering mess, and I wasn't even going to say the red ball you play
Mm.
with, and he went, "Oh my God, the red ball," and so it's love. That's what it is. I mean, you
I
can't
think
define love.
I think animals are so pure consciousness. They're pure beings without manipulation, without the ability to manipulate, that a relationship with an animal will be so much more fulfilling, I think, unless you find, a person who is just a genuine person, which unfortunately is becoming more and more rare. But an animal will always go straight to your heart, especially a dog. I don't know much about cats. I've never had a cat, but dogs I know especially do go straight into the gut, and they will connect at a very, very deep level at once because they know unconditional love.
They do. It's
better
a
than we do.
purity there. And people sometimes have ulterior motives and intentions. There are genuine people out there, but and there are people that are kind. I don't know if I want to use pure, but they're hard to find.
Mm-hmm. They are. Yeah. Children are the closest you'll get.
That's true, because they say what they think. And, it's actually, we can learn from children. We should be more like them, that we should speak from our heart. We don't have to be mean about things, but we should speak from our heart. So so this makes a lot of sense. So it's going to probably be really healing for people to hear kind of what you've been through and on your path. And a lot of people do suffer with depression and with anxiety issues, especially with, we're living in so much uncertainty these days. We have a little bit of a break now. Things are getting a little better, but the uncertainty can also throw people into these states. Anybody, if you're human. So talk about how the near-death experience, how you started really throwing yourself into that and learning about this, and how did that manifest?
Difficult to remember because it was such a long time ago, but I remember it was probably since the anxiety started at 12, when the fear of death really started taking hold. Because to me it was an imminent danger, although it wasn't physically, emotionally, mentally. To me it was. And I started, because I always believed that once you die, and that's it. There's no other reason to think otherwise, because we know that the brain creates consciousness, and therefore logically when the brain goes, so do you. However, I'd heard of near-death experiences on passing, but I never believed they were anything more than neurochemical phenomena or electrical phenomena of a dying brain, which I can still hold to some degree in purely subjective cases. However, that began to make me question after I learnt about veridical perception, which is something that should not happen. And for those that don't know, veridical perception is effectively near-death experiences in which those who come out of their body, allegedly, whatever that means, are able to see and document things that they can witness outside of the body that they shouldn't be able to witness from inside the body, depending on where they are, what they should be able to see, and what their brain is doing at the time. So, I mean, that could be their brains are flatlining on the EEG, which means no cortical activity, and they can see things, or it could mean that they're in one room and can see something far removed from where they are, whether or not their brain is flatlined, because either way, that shouldn't happen. So that's what veridical perception is, and that kind of added a level of empiricism to it, which drew me into this being a genuine phenomena worthy of consideration. And from there...
It does change things. I've seen that myself, but yeah, it is. It makes you really question. Wait a minute, we might be a little bit more than what we're being told we are.
And from there, I suppose that kind of opened the distinct possibility that there may be more to life after physical death. And at that point, that kind of acted as a crutch for me, because at that point, once I'd really kind of got into it over the 4 years or so up to my suicidal stage of life, that was my crutch. I thought, if there's no such thing of life after death, if it's all this sort of joke where you're brought up, you learn how to love, you learn how to have connections to people, you develop yourself, you have careers, you make a good name for yourself, and then you're gone forever and it's inconsequential. To me, I'd rather, if that was the case, to me, I think I'd rather not be here and go through all this, because I don't see the point. And that was my crutch, that there is more to this than meets the eye. And I can never understand. I mean, a lot of people will say it's the finiteness of life that brings its value, because you're only here for a certain amount of time to prove yourself. And to me, that doesn't make much sense, because ultimately, if death is the end of everything, fair enough, you can make the world better for the future generations. Great, that they're going to die as well. In fact, the universe is going to go into the great expansion or whatever it's called, and everything is going to die out. So what does it matter? If we could make the next generation's life hell for fun and be horrible enough to do that, ultimately that wouldn't matter either, because everything's going to go. So why does it matter? I think a lot about things, which is quite sad for 26 when I should be out drinking. But I don't like alcohol. It tastes like, I won't tell you what it tastes like, but it's not for enough.
It make you more depressed. So, or, hey, you came in this world not programmable. You think for yourself, and there's a few people like that. I was a deep little kid too. I would ask all sorts of deep questions, and I'm like, why does everybody not tell the truth? Why are they so mean? Why are we doing all this? Why are you saying one thing and doing something else? This world never really made sense to me.
No, it doesn't. And I was brought up in a Church of England school, which I don't know what it'd be for you in the States, but effectively it was a religious school, where you were taught to, you had to pray before every lunch, and you'd go into assemblies and have Bible readings. I was never religious. I thought it was all nonsense, and I still do to some degree, especially taking, religion literally. I can see the value in it, but I think all religions have been very much misunderstood over the years, that they've been developed and changed. And the idea of hell for not believing in God, to me, is blackmail. I don't see the sense in that. So,
God, that is so funny. It's blackmail. Well, some of this is guilt and it's dogma, and it's not coming from a place of love, and it's certainly not what a lot of the NDEers experience.
Well, that's right. And, when we look at religion, we have to think back to the origins, because I'm pretty sure that what Jesus taught, what the Prophet Muhammad taught, is nothing like what we're saying they did. Because you're talking about cultures that are 2,000 years old, have completely different frames of reference, speak a different language. So to translate that into modern day understandings, especially those who have then taken the Bible or any other holy text, added things to keep control of their own civilizations, to take anything in the Bible or other religious texts literally now, to me, makes very little sense. And I hope it isn't the case, because if it is, some of the passages in those texts are very frightening, to say the least.
No, I understand. And they have been, being, I couldn't help being a medium. It's just an after effect of my NDEs as a child. I couldn't help it. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't like it. I really didn't. I didn't want to come out. I didn't understand. I had no one to talk to about it. But I've heard, I still get it. I still get judgment against that. And there's normal people that are really normal. They have some kind of spiritual opening, a Kundalini, a NDE, whatever it is. And now they're like, oh my God, I see spirit people on it. And it's not, oh, isn't it great? No, it's not necessarily great. What do you do with that? So the Bible says it's inherently bad, but the way I look at it is we're spirit. We're spirit people. So how's that bad? Why are they really that different than us? They're not.
Yeah. To me, the way to understand any phenomena of human experience is science. Genuine science, open science, not to look at the texts of cultures far, far removed from our own. And we have the ability now to study these phenomena in a scientific way. Perhaps a qualitative way, because a lot of them are based on subjective experiences. Qualitative, basically, for those who don't know, means that you're taking, you can say anecdotal data, I suppose, and finding patterns in it when you've got enough samples, which we certainly do for near-death experiences. But add to that the empirical nature of veridical perception as well, and you've got a genuine phenomenon. So we can study this subject, and we can understand how it works through a scientific process. Science is about development, not religion, which is about kind of having these predetermined ideas and proving them. It's a top-down kind of way of looking at the world.
Well, I think that, as far as religion goes, it helps some people because they need that structure. They need the structure. But we have to remember, man-made. And it is not, spirituality has to do with your own personal journey and your own spiritual quest, which to me, that's the one I'm interested in. And, that's the higher road. And, I feel like everybody should follow their own way and not, if it helps, if anything helps, great, but you shouldn't have to listen to anyone else but your own self.
I think religion for those who find it comforting is great, because ultimately, whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter, because if it helps you, fine. To me, I can't live like that. I need to know what's true and what isn't. But I think from my own research and the research of many others, moving from an organized religion into kind of a self investigation of your own consciousness and the nature of reality through a scientific process will give you everything that religion has to offer, in terms of maybe not paradise in the way that it's portrayed in heaven and things like that, but certainly a version of that which is just as good, minus the torment of hell and the blackmail of don't believe in this and you go to hell, minus the levels of control, minus the devil, because there's no evidence for that as far as I can see, or not strong enough for me to believe it. But there is for these other side of things, which to me offers more than organized religion and is backed by evidence to suggest it is actually a phenomenon, a genuine objective place, probably not the right word, but state, I suppose.
Yeah. So as you started now, how did you start looking at, did you look at individual NDE stories, near-death experience stories, or how did you move forward with your interest in this?
I didn't really do much for a while, outside of hearing about these odd cases here and there. You'd heard of Eben Alexander, you'd heard of Colton Burpo and whoever else, these experiences, but I never really did much about it until I started to gather an opinion that these may be more because of the veridical perception, but I didn't look into it that much. At the time I had too much going on, but it kind of seeded that interest in me. And then I started Seeking I in 2018. Maybe slightly before that, I'd started asking people online what they thought. Most of these were on forums like Yahoo Answers, where if you asked any question like about after death, you were immediately put into the religious category and told keep out of science, which was nonsense. But outside of that, I didn't do much. And then when Seeking I started really reaching out to those who would know a lot more about it, the scientists who have researched it, Bruce Grayson, Jan Holden, among many others, Titus Rivers, and I've spoken to so many people now, and that's when it really began.
Okay, so it was 2018 with IANS, which I know that you help, volunteer and do a lot of work for them on their YouTube channel and different various things. So so it was really through you starting your channel that you started working with other researchers and sort of investigating this more. Yeah, there's no better way than to hear it straight from the horse's mouth, is it?
The problem I find with those who, especially who are opposed to near-death science, who write about it publicly and comment very friendly things on YouTube about it, are coming at this from reading third-party articles about the scientists, who automatically assume they must be pseudoscientists and have never spoken to them, have never looked at the research. I don't like doing that. I prefer to go to the people who have done the research themselves, not those who are writing about their research. Because if you get it, as you say, direct from the horse's mouth, you get it free from interpretation outside of the scientists who took the research themselves.
Right. Like Dr. Jeffrey Long, he researched over 3,000 people. So at some point, and he was not sure before he started, is this really is this a real phenomenon? I mean, or, honestly, these many people can't make it up. And then he, now with your research, I wanted to ask you what you found. Some of the things that he found is the higher level ones versus just the out of body, that they come back with different after effects, and there's different things. As you move forward, what are things that you found that were commonalities with near-death experiences? Because they're not all the same.
Yeah, I mean, my main focus isn't really the near-death experience, although it is a key aspect of it because it's the most. But I do look at other phenomena, quite a few as well. But from what I know about, and because of that, the reason I bring that up is because I haven't gone like solely in depth to near-death experiences alone, so I'm not familiar with the overview of everything. But from what I can see, familiarities between near-death experiences, they all have an underlying series of factors which follow a specific timeline. So people will usually come out of the body first, go through a tunnel, possibly go into a light, have a life review. This is what I say, I'm probably not familiar with the full spectrum of the experiences, but then come back, are told they're not ready to go and come back. Now, those are similar, very, very similar, which suggests a pattern, because if you've ever done quantitative data analysis, that's what you do. You're looking for patterns amongst many different samples. And that's kind of the pattern of a near-death experience. And of course, you have the Bruce Grayson scale, which is then compared to the experience to determine whether it was a near-death experience or not. And from there, just get back to my train of thought. So from there, go on.
So with the spiritually, so now tell me all the different areas you look. So you're looking at the afterlife. Do you look at spiritually transformative experiences too and compare it? Because you're right, you do look for patterns. There are certain patterns, the higher level ones versus people that have gone to the lighter, the higher levels versus the people that just popped out in the hospital and came back. But then they start crossing over into spiritually transformative experiences where people could just be meditating and have something similar happen. What do you feel about that?
This is one subject that I'm very emphatic about. For anybody that wants to research anything, you must understand the full context behind why people believe what they do, and don't take it on the chin that they just believe it because they heard about it and like the idea. Many people I've seen who have said, near-death experiences are obviously created in the brain and they're obviously dying brain phenomena, which they may be. However, you haven't taken into consideration the various other avenues of research that have conglomerated together to form that belief that near-death experiences are more than that. Terminal lucidity is one that I have looked at, which is, are you aware of terminal lucidity? I'm sure you are.
Oh, what is this name again?
Terminal lucidity.
Terminal lucidity. I don't really know much about it. I mean, maybe I do, and I just don't know the right term.
So when people are dying of a brain degenerative disease such as Alzheimer's or some form of dementia, what they find a lot of the time, well, not a lot of the time, it's rare, but it does happen, which is the white crow of the series. They find that a week, maybe a day, maybe an hour before they pass, they suddenly return to full lucidity.
Yeah, I've seen that with people that are passing. I just saw it with my father-in-law, and he was he was in and out of a coma, and then he just woke up one day. He's talking of a storm. He's very clear. He asks people to do certain things, and then he was gone 2 days later.
Indeed. And so, to explain that in physical terms, you'd have to look at the brain spontaneously regenerating itself, or some extra phenomena of the brain that we have never seen before, to explain it in physical terms. And then you've got that, you've got evidential mediumship and Pekindarian experiences. And a Pekindarian experience is when someone, maybe during a near-death experience, but also during mediumship, where they get a message through from somebody who's passed, who they didn't know had passed and had no reason to believe that they'd passed. And then that's maybe after the experience, shortly after, they then get a phone call to say, Lucy's just had a car crash and she's died. Something like that. And that's a Pekindarian experience. But other mediumship experiences where someone will tell of an object or an item or something that's hidden somewhere they never knew about, and then they go and find it, that sort of veridical aspect, that's another line of strong evidence.
That comes through a lot with when I do stuff, and I like the evidence. I know that might seem strange, but I have a right and a left brain kind of mentality, so I need that. I don't need all this fuzzy stuff. I need I didn't know they did it. I love when they don't know stuff and then they look it up or go in the attic and there it is. It's so cool.
Yeah, I'm the same, because it just adds that extra level of objectivity, and it's easy to dismiss until it happens to you, and then. People can say, oh, well, it was staged, it was false memory and all that. You say, okay, what happens then if you go to a mediumship reading and someone tells you To take an example, there's a gun hidden down the back of the cupboard in the basement, and then you go down and find it exactly where it is. What do you do with that now? Was that a false memory? Was that a delusion? It's like people who say it's like people that say that poltergeist activity isn't real. I don't know if it is. I've never seen any. I've never really looked at it. But they scoff and say it's nonsense. What happens if you walk into a room and there's a table floating in midair? Then what do you do?
Well,
what do you do with that information?
What do you do? I've seen something float. It was a place I went to. I've seen it float. It's still, I'm a medium, and it was shocking.
Exactly. And then people will say you're making it up, you're doing that, and you were a skeptic, but you've seen it and it's personal experience, and now that adds another layer. So that's why personal experience is important. So you've got those. You've then got things like psi phenomena, like remote viewing, which is seeing something at a distance, effectively, among other, hauntings, I suppose, if you want to say that, veridical hauntings. I don't know much about that, but I know there are cases like I probably just made that up, but effectively it's where, but hauntings that can be verified as being unexplainable, I suppose. I mean, the work of Lloyd Auerbach and folks like that, I probably made that up, but that's what I would call it. Haunting experiences that can be verified as being genuine by researchers. Apart from that, I'm trying to rack my brains to other phenomena. There are many, many other phenomena, as well as the fact that there's no theoretical mechanism as to how the brain could create consciousness in the first place. And that it's one of the biggest assumptions in biology and in science that the brain produces consciousness. And that's an assumption. And it's a good assumption because in everyday life it makes sense. Until you start looking at really the mechanism of to how that would be. Because ultimately the brain is nothing but a series of unconscious matter in a very complex organization, passed with an electric volt passed through it, and various chemicals, all of which are constituted of unconscious matter. And then they generate a conscious experience somehow. And a good example of what I mean is Dr. Bernardo Kastrup's analogy of taps and pressure valves and pipes. So the brain and the neurons in the brain are a binary system of on and off switches, basically action potential, no action potential, and that's it. Albeit very, very complex. But if you had the same level of complexity in taps and pipes, which are also a binary system, on or off, if you were to turn these taps on and off in a very complex way, could you expect that system of taps and pipes become conscious, knowing that they were just taps and pipes, regardless of how big and how complex it is? And most people would say no. And that's the analogy, because taps and pipes being on and off are effectively the same as the brain firing or not firing. They're on and off switches.
Well, there's obviously something else going on there. And, I don't know how it works, but I know that when I had Ray Hernandez on, he has his Consciousness Institute, and he believes that we're creating, our consciousness is creating the experiences we need in life. And that might be very well true, which goes along with manifesting. And so it begs to ask, how much of the creator, how much are we creating? You know what I mean? How much of the creation is coming within us? Some of the things I do believe that science cannot, at this point, predict, like quantum physics, they cannot. But we can. It still can be. It still can be patterns. It still can be measured in patterns. It still is information and data. But I think some of the things we don't know. We just have evidence of.
There's a lot of people will say that we can't scientifically study something because we don't have a mechanism for how it works. So we must throw out any ideas that aren't mechanismed. Like we say that the consciousness exists somewhere outside of the brain. How does that work then? We don't know. How does the brain produce consciousness? We don't know that either. So, it's almost a double standard. But the fact is, regardless of whether it can be explained or not, phenomena exist that counter the current scientific paradigm. No, we can't explain it. If we could explain it, then what's the point in science? Because science is the process of discovery. We're supposed to see novel phenomena, make novel observations, and then aim to test those, hypothesize about what's going on, test that, and learn it. That's the whole point of science. Find observable phenomena and learn how they work. Because we don't know how they work yet doesn't mean it's not science. It means it's in the process of the scientific discovery.
I think that's absolutely true. Just because you don't know doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That just hasn't, or maybe the way in which it's being looked at.
It's not.
Yeah, as you say, it's not just the case of we can't explain it, so therefore it doesn't exist. It does exist. We've seen that it exists. We just can't explain it.
Exactly. No. And now I wanted to ask you. So after your findings and interviewing several people, and with your afterlife research, what do you feel like now happens when people die? What do you personally think? Do you think that we're dead and that's it, or do you think there's something else going on there?
I think there's more than enough evidence to suggest, and I'm going to be careful how I word this, to suggest that at the time when the brain's in a certain state where it should not be able to physically produce consciousness, that conscious experience exists. What that means for permanent death, nobody really knows, because in order to know that, one would have to be permanently dead. However, the evidence you can get through things like evidential mediumship from those who have entered a state of physical permanent death can offer evidence to suggest it would be reasonable to believe that your consciousness does exist in an individuated form after death. For how long, we don't know. Could it all be, fake? Could it all be false memory? Yes, it could. But there's more than enough evidence now, objective evidence, in my opinion, to suggest that there is much more to experience than the brain produces it, and once you die, you die. The nature of that, what that would be like to live, we don't know, because we'd have to be referencing, the only way we could imagine what that would be like would be to reference what we experience here. And what we experience here is effectively a big hallucination. It's an illusion. And it has to be, because everything we experience, yeah. But it makes sense. It makes sense from a scientific point of view, because everything we experience is the interpretation of inputs that our brain translates into experience. The inputs, the information within those inputs are reality as it is, but what we see is only as far as our brain can interpret it. If you see what I mean.
Well, that's with really anything. That's with our learning, with our education, our ability to be able to comprehend certain things. Certain people can't comprehend certain concepts because some people are opened up more intellectually than others to be able to absorb certain things. So that's still part of our experience. So we can only absorb things at what we feel is true through our own personal experiences and our own lenses.
Mm-hmm.
But I think people confuse that with meaning that because our brain is effectively dictating how we experience the world, that means that the brain is creating our experience of the world, which that's a correlatory issue. It's not, a cause and effect observation, because regardless of how we interpret the world and regardless of how our brain is, whether it be severely impaired or not, consciousness still exists. The pure state of being aware, not of being aware of something perhaps, but if you look at somebody who has severe hydroencephaly, who has ultimately, no brain, but is still alive, you can still say that they're conscious. You would still think, any animal as well, you'd think, if you look at a dog, you'd say, is that dog conscious? Yes, you'd think so, regardless of what the brain is capable of doing. What the brain, in my opinion, is, as far as I can glean from what I understand, it is more of a filter system, which receives it receives some form of consciousness which exists in a way that we don't understand yet. Consciousness, I think, is a part of nature as of yet undiscovered that acts through the brain to project the world as we know it into a three-dimensional experience.
If
I
that
like
makes
the way you
sense.
put that. Yeah, I like the way you put that. So, yeah, because otherwise it would all be the same, but it's not. It's individualized.
Mm.
So, and then it goes hand in hand. What are we? I think it goes even deeper with our senses and our different forms of communication. What we think we ultimately manifest because we're creating our own reality. So that it could be as simple as a job that we want or a particular lifestyle, whatever it is that we're thinking, um, is what we manifest. I know that when I was in my coma and I hung out with Jesus in a place that looked like paradise, he did talk about that. He talked about creation, how we create with our minds, and to be careful about what we think. Because it's not like I want this or I need, but it's in our, like when our minds are drifting and we're kind of mocking up things we want, that's when that happens. So we're definitely responsible for a lot of it. So I think that there's so much research being done on how does that work? How does that manifestation? What is this holographic universe? What is it that we're creating this out there? And how do we interact with others on this level?
Well, I mean, as I say, the universe as we know it is only the universe that our brains can perceive. It's not the universe the way it is. It's the way that the humans can perceive it. I'm sure a shrimp would see the universe and its life in a completely different way. They can see so many different colours that we can't see. And their idea of what life is would be so much different because they interpret the information differently. It's the information itself that is the way the universe actually is. But again, no one will ever know what that is because we're only hardwired to perceive it in a certain way.
Yes.
Because, yeah.
So do you feel like that your afterlife research is now becoming more also about life too? It's really about life, isn't it?
I don't think you can separate them. I think when you start looking at death, whether you're just going to prove to yourself whether there's an afterlife or not, other questions will come up that dig you deeper and deeper into the nature of reality. Because if you start looking at death and you conclude that we don't die after physical death, that we still exist, then you have the question of, well, what does that mean about the nature of consciousness? And then you start to think, well, if what we think we know about consciousness is wrong, then what does that imply about how the brain works and how matter works? And then that implies, well, where does this consciousness come from in the first place? And then that implies, well, is it there already? And then you start to question the whole nature of the universe and of reality itself. So something as simple as, I wonder if there's an afterlife or not, eventually leads into a full philosophical discovery or questioning of how everything is, the ultimate questions of life. I think necessarily.
Yeah, I do think they blend into one another and then the whole purpose of being here. So this is the way that I look at it. If like you said, right from the beginning as a kid, you just wanted to know. I've always wanted to know. And I feel somehow, some way, I'm going to get my answers because I feel like there are answers that are out there that it depends if you're available, if your mind is willing to go there. I think that we can find out these things. So do you feel like after looking through this, and I know you're still in the process and you're interviewing a lot of people and you're still involved with your afterlife research, do you feel that, do you look at things a little bit more spiritual now? Do you see people a little differently? Do you see yourself differently?
Mm-hmm. Very. Yeah.
Does it give more meaning? Is it more hopeful to know we kind of keep going on?
It certainly, it adds a level of hope because without, if you were to just die and that's it, to me there would be no hope because it would mean nothing. So the possibility,
nothing.
It is,
and the possibility that we continue adds the first layer of hope. It adds any layer of hope because then everything that you do in life has a meaning to some degree because it's consequential. To what degree we don't know, but the way I look at myself now is certainly more than synapses in the brain and a big gooey mess of cells inside your skull. Certainly that's a very important aspect to life in the physical sense, but I don't think now that's the end all and be all. And then from there you start to think, well, what does that mean about me and what does that mean for why I'm here? And so you develop a view of yourself as more than human, I suppose. As something that's currently playing a human life, something that's experiencing a human life but is playing a character, I suppose, at the time.
Yeah, I like that. That's true. I look at this as either a movie, or sometimes it's very surreal, or like a book, and we're creating the next chapter in the book. And and I also look at connections. Every now and then I'll meet someone and I just know that I know them, and it's very confusing to me sometimes, because then you want to go, where did I meet them? And I didn't meet them in this life. And so to me, I've have things that I think it has to do with your quest for adventure. Like this UFO thing was not really in my radar. I started interviewing people now. Now I've seen UFOs. Even my husband, who's a huge skeptic of everything, he pointed it out and saw it first. I went, "Gosh, it's huge," and it was like we were like we see them every day. But I think it's whatever you're interested in life, you're kind of pull that toward you. And then so this is why I think that we're learning from each other. We're teachers, we're students, and it's amazing how the people that come along our path at the time that we need it and that we can learn from. But I think that this is important because there's so many people that are lost and depressed, and they're like, what about people that have spent their whole life and they have kids and this and that, and they worked a job, and now they're like, well, what does that all mean? A lot of people probably ask that. And I think it is hopeful to know that it's a continuation and it's a development of the soul. I'm curious, have you looked into the premise of, or have you done it personally yet, past life?
I have. I've interviewed Dr. Jim Matlock on his work with Dr. Ian Stevenson's various investigations. I haven't gone deeply into that, so I'm not overly familiar with it. However, I do know that there is good evidence to suggest that is also a reality, potentially.
Yeah, and especially if there's someone that remembers and they find out evidence, we're back to evidential, like there's no way they should know about this invention, or there's no way they would know. I've done past life and actually pulled my names from different eras and look, and it's exactly, I did whatever I'm supposed to do. So, I don't put labels or judgments on things. I go, that's interesting. You know what I mean? I mean, what do you do with that? You just go, oh, that's interesting. I do know that we definitely go on, but I think what's, important for me is just being able to bear being in present time and try to have some kind of a joy right now, which a lot of people have a hard time doing. Do you feel like that this research has brought you more in present time to be able to enjoy the world a little bit more and see it a little differently? Or
I think if it wasn't for this research, I wouldn't still be here. I think if I didn't have, and it goes deep into personal things that I won't get into, but the research led me to have an outlook on what happens after. It gave me enough hope to keep myself alive. Because for the hope that what I hope will happen has led me to bear the earth, I suppose, for as long as I need to be here. Because life on earth is not fun for the vast majority of people. Us in the developed world who have access to so many things that we forget we should be grateful for. We have it very easy, generally, for a lot of the time. Obviously, there are cases that's not the case, but for the most population over here, we have it. We have access to free water, or to water, to food whenever we need it, and a nice home, etc. But even so, any amount of money and any amount of possessions in the world will never make you happy if you're not intrinsically happy. And a lot of people aren't. And life can be very, very, very tough. And regardless of how, if you're the butchest weightlifting male in the world, if life hits you a tough blow, it will humble you to realize that you are only human, and that being human means you're going to suffer in some way at some point. There are also very, very good things about being alive. And it's your outlook on how to approach these things. You can approach negative experiences as it's tough and it's made me depressed and I don't want to be here anymore, which unfortunately many people, not through no fault of their own, end up believing, as I did. Or you can look that negative experiences have the potential to teach you so much more about the nature of you and the importance in life than any positive experience ever would. I mean, I've been thinking about these sort of things since I was 12, and most 12-year-olds don't even have to ponder this sort of thing, But it makes you, having negative experiences and learning from them grows you up very, very, very fast and matures you very, very fast, because you develop wisdom, I suppose.
No, it's wisdom. It's things in life and also decisions about what you have in life. But I was a deep little kid too, and I didn't really have anyone. I was very mature, and I thought kids were boring and they acted stupid.
Yeah, the educational system teaches you how to be intelligent, and intelligence teaches you how to exist in society and how to be successful in society. But experience teaches you wisdom, and wisdom teaches you how to be happy and how to ensure that everybody around you is happy and how to live. Wisdom is more important for the core of life, but certainly, intelligence is important for society. But ultimately, society is a man-made thing.
Well, here's the thing. I believe that we do have a contract we agree to before we get here. I don't think we agree to, have some horrible disease or this or that. But what we may agree to is the lesson of humility or whatever, and we get it however that may be the help on the journey. But I don't want to be like anyone else. So I'm cool with it. I never did. So I'm okay with that. If I thought everybody else was like robots and boring. And so, I'm okay with that. I used to bellyache and complain about it a lot, but not these days. I'm like, I kind of relish in the fact that I ask and I like talking to people that also ask and that question, and that, we should be allowed to do these things. We should be allowed to question everything. And either it comes out to be true or not, who cares? And I don't really care which way it falls. I don't really, I just want to find out what I feel. I just want to find out whatever I feel is truth. So I kind of relish in that now. So, I mean, everything you're saying really connects to me and my heart. I think what you're doing is a beautiful job, and your channel. I want to make sure I tell everybody also about your channel, Seeking I, and you started that in 2018 or no, 2018. You did? Okay. Okay. So you started 2018. And I know you have a lot of your research and your findings and so forth on that. And you're also writing a book. Do you want to tell everybody about your book? I know it's a little different, but I think it's great.
Yeah, well, I'm writing a couple of books, but one's kind of on the backstop. That's an autobiography about my experience with anxiety and depression. That won't be done for a long time, if at all. But the book I'm working on at the moment is a fiction novel. As you say, quite different from what we're talking about now, but it's a fiction novel, and it's one that I just thought one day, how to start this subject. So I have had insomnia now for a long time. My sleep cycle is really messed up, and I always used to listen to audiobooks to help me get to sleep, the Harry Potters and the various different. And I thought one day, I wonder if I can do that. I wonder if I can write a book. So I'll have a go. So I did. So I started writing it, and I literally just had an idea. Right, this is what it's going to be about. It's going to be about I won't spoil it, but it's going to be about a creature called Russet, not human, and he's going to live here, and that's all I knew. So I started writing, and I just let whatever came to mind at that point come to mind, and I just continued doing it, and I'm quite proud of how it's coming out. But yeah, that's
well. When you have that, you'll have to let me know so we can have you back on so you can talk about your book and more findings.
Great.
So
Yeah.
look, you have been a joy. I love how authentic you are and how genuine, because that is rare indeed. And the fact you're being vulnerable enough to share a part of yourself is a gift. And I appreciate that. And I know others listening will too. So I support you. I think you're doing a great job, and, just keep up the good work. And thank you for sharing part of your journey with my viewers today. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Tamara. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Darren, so much. Take care. Thank you. Namaste.
And you. And I look forward to having you on my channel as well.
Oh, yes, that's right. I get to be on your channel.
Good
Oh,
after this.
it's my honor. So thank you
Brilliant.
so much.
Thanks, Tamara.
Bye-bye.